I'm introducing Allen Haynes. All of the pictures, not all of them. I talked with him, he said not all of them are his. Most of the pictures in this room are done by him. This beautiful, beautiful eclipse, that lady over there with the eye that I'm just entranced by, and that shell that I don't even know what it pulses in my brain. I just love it. I really do. I would buy that.
That makes it worthwhile.
I know it does. So Allen Haynes was born 75 years ago in New Jersey. And then 4 months, according to this and his knowledge, he came here to Tennessee with his mother and grandfather, and they lived in Portland. He must have really loved it because he's still here, just in Gallatin. He's done so many jobs. There's mention of an F-106 interceptor on here. I don't know what that is, but in my head, I get this idea of a giant plane that just goes like, phew, 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 phew. And that's amazing. I'm like, I got you all laughing. All right, let's see. He's worked in the Sumner County museums, in the archives, in other county historical organizations. I can talk. He's lived a long, fulfilling life. And in that long, fulfilling life, he decided that he wanted to come here and talk to us. Because we're pretty amazing. Everybody? No, you are. You are, and he is too. I see you. You're getting a little red in the face. It's true, though. He was in the Air Force. This happens. But he was in the Air Force, and for about 4 years. Which, again, thank you. I don't know if I'd be here if you hadn't. I don't know. Maybe I wouldn't be born. But he served there, and while he was in the Air Force, he met his first wife. They had some sons, they had a daughter, had a good life. And then he lived some more, because we all keep living, we all keep on going. Even when you just want to take a nap, keep on going. And working all those jobs, from washing machines, like repairing them, not washing them, repairing computers, business machines, all of this. He found his second wife, Kathy, and they shared 16 happy years together before she passed away. And God's like, come on, Kathy, now we just gotta wait for Howard. When he's here, we'll dance. And church has always been an important part of his life. Because look at him, he's so nice. How can it not be? But he's gonna come up here later, or maybe he'll sit down, and he's gonna talk about Walter Durham. I don't know a lot about Walter Durham, but I know that he's really important in not just our county, because we have a room of him. I've seen some mention of him at the Vol State Library, at the archives, everywhere. So if you are here for that, to learn a little more, because I would love to learn a little more, I'm gonna watch this video later, because he's recording that, then he will be your person when he gets up here. Thank you for listening to me, and I hope my introduction was good. Before I go, though, I'd like to let you know. Later, at this very spot, this library, on October 30th, we're going to have another lecture by, I really hope I don't butcher this, Gracia Down Strother with the historic bridal house of Cottontown. And on November 13th, with Shirley Wilson, the genealogy of then and now. If you guys like this, come on back. I might introduce it again. Okay. Come on in. It's okay. You don't need to sneak in. I also got them all looking at you, so that it's okay.
He's going to be on the screen twice.
He's going to be on the screen twice? Well, there you go. Now, I'm gone because I got to work. But again, I'm going to watch the video when it's over. I'll be leaving you guys. You'll be doing that.
She mentioned Walter Durham. Walter Durham's been an important part of my life, later on in my life, really. Glenda, of course, was Walter's secretary for 150 years. And she and Johnny and Jack, we all graduated from Portland, Sumner County High School. If Kay's not here, is she?
Yeah.
I always like to brag her about SCHS because she says Station Camp High School, but it's not. It's Sumner County High School. But Walter and I worked together with Glenda and everything on several of his books that he did. And I was privileged to be able to do a lot of pictures and work with him in preparing a lot of pictures, as well as taking a lot of pictures too. And you'll see a group of books in some of this slide in here that I've worked on. Some of his, some of Bill Pereira's, several different publications, different people and everything. So we'll get started, and I'm going to sit down, and I'll probably lose my voice, but I got some water up here, so that'll be good. I have a camera up here that it all comes down to cameras and photography would be. I've got my camera under the thing. But this camera is a 1907 Connolly that my grandfather bought from Sears in 1907. My mother's had the box, so I've got the box and the camera, the box that it came in from Sears. But he made pictures for many years with that using glass plate negatives. And if you don't know what glass plate negatives are, I'll show you one later in the program. But the camera was getting old. The bellows was falling apart and everything. And I found, while I was in the Air Force, this boot from the control stick that the pilot used to fly the plane, you know. The boot works just beautiful on that camera for bellows. And you'll notice some of the things that I've done throughout this presentation and throughout my life, if you know me, and some of you do know me, that I not only make pictures or whatever, but I'll make things. If I need a part or something, I may create the part or whatever. And this, that, and the other. Just, that's part of who I am. And Gracie called, everybody knows Gracie, I guess. She called 3 or 4 weeks ago or something like that, and said that she needed somebody for this Walter Durham series, and wondered if I would. I was the first one she called, and she said, you know, people see you around different places, and I don't try to get out to be seen or anything, but I'm usually behind the scenes, and I like that. But she said, people see you occasionally, and they see your name on different things and different books and different places and pictures that you've done, and nobody knows who you are. She said, come and tell us who you are, what you do, and what you've done, you know. So that's really what the biggest part of this is. And I don't like to talk about myself, but there's a lot of it is, you know. And also I'll be covering Mr. Stark at the end, and the preservation of the glass plate negatives at the archives. So we'll start off with that. And if I sit down more than I stand up, or vice versa, it's because my back is out. So I'm going to cover a lot of stuff today. I'll start off with family. I've already talked about what I'm going to be doing, this, that, and the other. Let's see. I'm using things that I'm not used to using. I was born in New Jersey. I tell everybody I had enough sense to leave when I was 2 weeks old. and this is my mother and my father. My father was in the Army when they got married and went to New Jersey. He was training for the service. He was in the Army. Asbestos 5 in the 4th Division, the 22nd Infantry. And when he went over, he was killed during just shortly after Normandy, just a few days. And he only saw me 2 or 3 times before he went over. And then when he died, I was 9 months old, and so I never knew him really. My grandfather, when we moved back to Portland after 3.5 months, Mother and I visited several different places with my uncle and my aunt up in Maryland. And I had been to South Carolina. I'd been in 10 states by the time that I got back to Tennessee. And we stayed with my grandfather. And my grandfather was a big influence in my life. He had a house he was renting from the Parks fella. I forget what his first name was. But down on Church Street, and they went in Portland, and we went there and lived with him for a while. Eventually, we lived on North Street in Portland, and so that's pretty much where I grew up until I was a sophomore. And I'll tell you a little bit about Papa too. Papa is what we call my grandfather. That's my mother's father. He was a jack of all trades. He was a photographer and a jeweler and a radio builder and a chair maker and a mill operator, a repairman, keeper of history. And here's a picture that he made with that camera in the early 1900s, probably around 1908 or 10, up in Woodburn, Kentucky. These are some pictures that he made with just a regular box camera in Portland. He was quite a photographer, and he didn't make portraits as much as he did just everyday photographs, but those are really important in history. This is the depot and all the Whittlers, and the guy on the right over there is my stepfather, and then right next to him is Bob Grantham. Bob Grantham just passed away here this summer, I think it was. You can tell from everything that my grandfather did who I took after. This is a picture of a house that a lot of people probably have seen and don't recognize it. It's north of Franklin, Kentucky, on the right, just past the Octagon House. But I was going by there one day and I thought, you know, I think I'll make a picture of that from the same spot. So I made a picture of the same house, same spot, just many, many, many years later. You know, same house, same place. Anyhow, my grandfather, as I grew up, he lived up over the hardware store in Portland, and this is where we were at this particular time, and he and I worked together on building a crystal radio. I've still got the crystal radio and the headsets. He helped me with my toys, and you know, even back then I was interested in helicopters and airplanes and stuff. Also, I found it interesting here where I'm sitting up at his apartment reading this Mechanics Illustrated, and interesting thing about the magazine is it has a special section in it about America's plans to conquer outer space. I read that on the bottom of it, and I thought that's interesting because I didn't know at that particular time that would be part of my future. When I was 8 years old, my mother remarried Floyd Hunter, and he had a farm out between Sangtown and Brackentown, 60 acres, and we had cows out there and plenty of strawberries to hoe and plow and everything, and we had tobacco to hoe and plow and everything. We didn't have a tractor. We had a mule. It was something special for me to learn, you know. But it wasn't all work. I did enjoy swinging on grapevines and going rabbit hunting and squirrel hunting and lots of other things too. It was just it was a good time growing up. When I was a sophomore, I bought a 3-inch reflector telescope from Edmund Scientific in Barrington, New Jersey, and it cost $25.25, and a few years later they went up to $25.50. But I've still got that telescope. It still works, and it's just a great telescope. I still use it, you know, for looking at the craters on the moon, looking at the rings around Saturn, this, that, and the other. But there again, that's it's building in my mind, you know, things to be and things to do. It's my whole future's being built up, I guess you'd say. We went to church since we did live on North Street, and we moved over to near the Church of Christ there, close to the cemetery. The cemetery's right next door over here. And went to church there, and it's a big part of my life, and it still is. And we'll go to education. Education means a lot of different things. You can be book smart. You can be otherwise smart. And I was book smart enough to graduate from Portland. I wasn't at the bottom of the class, and I wasn't at the top of the class. I was somewhere towards the middle, and that's okay. There's our class picture that Mr. Stark made. And you'll see about the third row down, second one from the left, that's me. Let's see, Jack and Johnny are in there somewhere. Johnny's on the top row, third from the end on the right. Jack, you are in there, aren't you?
Third from the bottom on the right.
Ah, okay.
And I'm over here,
And Glenda is
right there.
one of our officers.
Oh, yeah, right over the word seniors and
To the left.
to the left.
Oh, you
That's
hadn't
Glenda.
changed a bit.
Still looks the same. But anyhow, I went to Tennessee Tech, and I didn't like studying, and I didn't make good grades, and what I excelled in was ROTC. So what do you do when you excel in ROTC? You join the Air Force. Now, I'm the one with the cap. Actually, middle row, second one from the end, on the right. Enjoyed the Air Force 4 years. I got married to Betty Hart, and that was a long time ago, wasn't it? We were married, and I worked in the Air Force. That was us. After our wedding, we went back to Washington State, where I was stationed at McCord Air Force Base. We went to Washington State in a Volkswagen. That was quite a trip.
Is it a tent? Do you have a tent with you?
Well,
Is it a tent on there?
no, that's a tarpaulin just to keep the rain off of the luggage that had to have up there. She was talking about F-106s. That's an F-106. That's what I worked on in the Air Force. I worked, they gave me experience in computers and radar and weapon systems and infrared. That little ball sticking up there is an infrared sensor, and you could lock onto a target, or we would check it out sometimes. Somebody would be out on the flight line with a cigarette, and you could lock on to the cigarette and follow it, you know. And infrared and rockets and missiles and power control systems, communications and all that stuff. And here's the flight line, the airplanes I worked on. Most of them were A's, and there's one B model here. There was another B model there. It had 2 seats, but I never did get to fly. I wanted to. But then I got out of the Air Force. Can you tell I was happy? I had the discharge papers and everything. There we are in the same Volkswagen on the way home. I think I don't know where we are, Grand Canyon or someplace probably. You'll notice I modified, as I do a lot of things, I modified the roof rack with some plywood and painted and sealed and everything. It not only added some extra room up there to put stuff, it protected the artifacts. Here I am talking about artifacts already. The things that's on the rack protects them from the wind and the rain and whatever. Plus, inside the car, I had made something. It was a little bit futuristic at the time. It was before GPS and telephones that you could read your directions on, you know, all that GPS location. But what I did was I took a 36 exposure roll of film, color slide film, and I photographed maps all the way from Washington State down through California, across Arizona, and around out of film in Louisiana. But I had made this unit that sat under the dash that I could flip a switch and turn it on and would project the maps onto a ground glass screen right there under the dash. And I had a little switch that I could run the maps backwards or forwards, you know. And that's a little futuristic, you know, at that time. But it worked great until I ran out of film in Louisiana. But I figured that was close enough to Tennessee, so.
How long did you take to get back to Tennessee?
It was a week or so, maybe a week and a half, something like that. But anyhow, we had a new baby in there too. Bill was 9 months old. That was fun.
How much was a gallon of gas?
Probably 25 cents, something like that. I ran the car pretty hot, pretty fast. 72 miles an hour was maximum cruising speed for it. And a lot of the roads you could do that on, you know, and no problem. And I stopped at a gas station in Louisiana one day, and the guy went around and raised the bonnet, I'll call it a bonnet, in the back to check the oil. You don't do that now. But he did it, and he put his finger in the little loop to pull it out to check the oil, you know, and he burned a blister around his finger because the engine was so hot. But the little things like that you remember over the years. Let's see. Here's our family. As this was back a few years ago, since Jenny is working, and you know, the family. After 30 years, we had a wonderful and happy family, but things happened and Betty and I parted after 30 years. About 5 years after that, I met Kathy at church, and we got married and lived happily, you know, for 16 years. We lived together, happily married, and she was sick quite a bit at that time and passed away. But now I've got two families. So, space race employment. In 1967, I began working for Boeing on the test stand at Mississippi Test Facility. That was the tallest structure in Mississippi at that time when the crane was up. That white thing, cylinder down at the bottom, is the first stage of the Saturn V moon rocket. It's 138 feet tall and 33 feet in diameter. And it had instrumentation on it when it came in on barge. It's on the barge right there. And came in from Michoud down at New Orleans. That's where it was built, the first stage. It has 5 rocket engines on there, and each one of them is 1.5 million pounds of thrust. So that's 7.5 million pounds. They would set us in a basket on top of that stage sometimes to take off the instrumentation and everything. I had to walk down through there, and it was, you don't want to trip over yourself because there's nothing to hang on to. This is the engines, the top part of the engines, the bottom part's down on the next floor. And the steps go up into the boat tail of the rocket, and that's where all the instrumentation was transmitted. All the electronics was up there, as well as access to the fuel tanks and this, that, and the other. That's me working on some, calibrating some instruments. And this is a test firing, 121, all that work for 121 seconds, just to make sure it works all right. That's 7.5 million pounds of thrust coming out that flame bucket there. And it was a roar, and it would break windows sometimes if the weather was bad and the clouds were low. It'd break windows in Picayune, which was 20 miles away. So they sent us down to the Cape, a couple of us, my foreman and I, down to the Cape to work on Apollo 4 and Apollo 5. Apollo 4 was the first Saturn V they ever launched, put together, you know, as a full built Saturn V. And we worked in the VAB. This is the VAB, Vertical Assembly Building. This is in the low bay area. This is the low part. The high part is back where I'm standing to take this picture. And it goes way up tall. Because the whole thing, the 363 foot tall stacked unit is sitting on a base that is 50 foot high or so anyhow. And then all that slides out of a door that's in the side of this building. I don't know if you well, you can't see the doors, you can see the edge of the door on the right side and on the other side. Those doors, if you raised the ball all the way up, you could slide the United Nations building in.
Oh, my goodness.
Pretty good size. This is the rocket out on the test stand. Not on the test stand, it's on the LUT, the Launch Unmilitary Tower, and the maintenance gantry is out there with it. But after all the work is done and everything, it's launched. I was out there at 3 o'clock in the morning on the on the launch pad, and all of the oxidation, not oxidation, all the condensation was coming down and everything. It was cool, it was dark, and the spotlights outside and everything. 3 o'clock in the morning doing some last minute instrumentation work, telemetry checks. And got off work, went home to Cocoa Beach and got my wife and son, and we went out to the levee 7 miles away and watched it go up. And it's going up through the clouds. And then this is just before staging, where they the first stage will separate from the second stage. And you see the rocket, which is just a tiny little thing up there, and the flame coming from it is about 1/4 of a mile long. Just the flame. It's crazy, but it's neat, you know. After all this was done, and we worked on Apollo 5 a little bit, then we went back to Mississippi Test Facility and worked on several other stages, first stages, until we were on stage 14. People were getting laid off at 20 years, and I had 3 years. And I thought, I can see the handwriting on the wall. I had a chance to either go to Alamogordo, New Mexico, Wichita, Kansas, or back down to the Cape. And I said, I'm going to Tennessee. So I came back to Tennessee and worked for Burroughs Corporation on business machines and bank machines and everything. And had a good time doing that, and worked for Simcoe. I worked for Burroughs for 21 years, and then I worked for Simcoe for 14 years, doing the same thing on the same machines with the same customers. But these are some mainframe computers. You could probably put all this stuff right now in a satchel. Hobbies and interests.
How long did you work with the space?
Do what?
How long did you work with the space?
3 years.
Only 3 years?
Yeah, just 3 years.
Wow.
But it was a great 3 years.
I'll bet.
Hobbies and interests, and everybody has hobbies and interests. Mine probably are not different than some, although they may be different from some. I worked for 25 years at the museum, doing a little bit of everything from mopping floors to accessioning and setting up floor exhibits. There's 3 floors in that building, and it's pretty much packed. And has everybody been there? No. Did I hear no? Well, you'll have to go. There you go. It's not important. That's in Gallatin, right behind Trousdale Place.
I have been there.
Oh, okay.
It looks different.
We haven't got one in Portland yet. We're
Working
working
on that.
on that, you know. Anyhow, worked there, pulling cables and painting and doing sessioning and this, that, and the other. And along with Juanita over here, we had did a lot of good work in there together. I also, about that time, let's go through some pictures here inside the museum. Also at that time, worked some for the Bledsoe Lick Historical Park, Historical Association too, and did some research for them. This is a picture of the Barker is the guy's name, and he's chopping up the log, putting the notches in it so that they can put together a lean-to there to sleep in overnight. There's David after an Indian attack. And I forget whether he was Isaac or Anthony Bledsoe in this, but he was one of them. And then the Indian Wars were over, but I got behind this cedar tree just to give it the appearance of it would. I'm not safe enough to get out and make the picture. I'm sort of hiding a little bit. But he's got his rifle aiming the other direction, and he's, you know, the little boy's touching the horse, so it's safe, you know. This is inside the cave of the skulls, which they found skulls in there way back in the back. This is an archaeological dig that was there. And this is a time capsule. This time capsule is a Tennessee bicentennial project. It was done in 1976.
That's right.
I'm tired. Anyhow, we built this time capsule. It's out of stainless steel, and it's 4 foot high, 16 inches in diameter. It has 400 items in it. It has instructions on the top because the bottom is welded, silver soldered. The seam on the side was welded. It was Magnaflux to make sure there were no leaks in it. The hat rim up at the top is welded on, and the lid that's on the top is silver soldered all around, and it has pressed words on there as to how to get into the time capsule. The little tubes coming out the side are silver soldered in. We purged it with argon, so there's no oxygen in there to make the artifacts oxidize. Then we pinched them off and silver soldered those. And after we did all that, we put it in a concrete culvert and concreted the ends and covered it over, and there's a plaque, a granite plaque out there where the flags are at Bledsoe Fort. And it's supposed to be there 100 years. And I hope somebody can find it in 100 years. I also worked with the Highland Rim Historical Society in Portland. And, oh, by the way, the time capsule, I have on the table up here a list of everything that's in that time capsule, if you wanted to look through it sometime. Highland Rim Historical Society asked me one time to do an exhibit for Portland. And so Betty Glover gave me 2 weeks to do it in. And so what I did, just out of the blue, you know, one of those wild things you do, I built a diorama up Main Street in Portland with all the buildings scaled at 1/160th scale. And I did the pictures of the buildings, the actual pictures and photographs of the buildings and put little red marks down to where they show up on the diorama. So that is on display now at the Richland Building in Portland on Main Street. There's another view of it. At the archives, you'll find this map. It's a 1836 map, and it's of Sumner County. There was a picture at the state archives that they had blown up actual size of the original map, which was done on paper that looked like, I saw the original map, looked like a paper bag, basically. And so I drew this one, and it is just like the original. Even some of the writing is upside down like it was on the original. The commissioners that did the map, they were on different sides of the map when they did it. So they wrote names on there. You can't see them right now, but some of the names on there, Malloy's up there on 31W is upside down. I think several of the names are upside down. And that's because they were on the other side of the table when they wrote them. And the descriptions of the districts are written on this map too. The original didn't have the descriptions on it. They had that on separate sheets of paper. But I put those on this map, and it's hanging in the archives right now. So if you go by there, you can see that one. This map, I was given this map. It's a 1937 map of Sumner County, and it's a real good map, traffic map. It's got all roads and everything on it, but it also has schools, it has churches, it has a lot of information, including the little dots that represent the houses that are on the roads in different places. This is a view of the map as it looked at that particular time on Portland. And here was Westmoreland. There was a hole in the middle of Westmoreland. And I had to do research to find out what was in the hole, using aerial photos and everything. Because what I wanted to do, and here's the 13th district. 13th district, a lot of the roads and the creeks and everything were faded real bad. But what I wanted to do was do a modern version of that map, and you can see what condition this one's in. It's in the museum now, upstairs. But the modern version looks like that now. It's the same map, same size, big map, and it'll take a couple of minutes for it to sharpen up probably, because it's about a 56 megabyte map. But, well, it's not sharpening up. Anyhow, all the districts are, I did different colors so that you could tell what district it was real easy. And got down to the pixels. I mean, 3 or 4 pixels. Some of those lines are working on it. It took me 2 months, a little over 2 months to do that. Hobbies, I've always been interested in airplanes, working on airplanes. And I built this airplane, but it's about a 56-inch wingspan, so it's not a big airplane, it just looks big. And I made it out at the airport, made the picture out at the airport. I was asked to, I was in the club in Nashville, Middle Tennessee Radio Control Society, and we went to places and did things for people, kids. I towed a banner behind the airplane one time, said the MTRCS flying for the kids. And they asked if I would fly at the Smyrna Airshow, so, and drop Tootsie Rolls. So I flew over the crowd at the airport, at the Smyrna Airshow, and dropped Tootsie Rolls, and the kids and the adults all went crazy trying to catch Tootsie Rolls, you know, with 7-inch streamers. The first attempt at flying there that I did, I had a lanyard that wasn't latched real good, and I dropped Tootsie Rolls out on the flight line, so everybody went out there and grabbed them and rewound them and put them back in there, and it worked that time. But I decided, instead of just making it fun, that I would put camera on there, and I had actually put a movie camera on there a few years before, about 1978. But this is out at Lock 4, out towards the end of Lock 4 Road. This is the airfield out there that goes to the end, that road does. And I've made several pictures from a model airplane. And this is the plane. I had to have some clearance to put my Canon AE-1 program camera underneath, so I put buggy wheels up it. They aren't on there now. Did that so I could fly out here at Bledsoe Fort. This is Bledsoe Fort, and they're getting ready for the dig there. This is pictures of the dig under in progress, trying to find the location of the fort. And you can see some of the pits that they've already dug. And while I was there, while I was doing this stuff, Sam, I stopped out at Fort Blunt over in Jackson County in Smith's Bend, and Sam Smith was out there. He was a state archaeologist, and he was out there doing an archaeological dig there, and needed some pictures for to see if there were any sites that he was missing there, you know. So I shot these pictures out for him out there. He weed-eated me a runway out there. I appreciated that. And while I was there, I had some more film left on the camera, so I flew about a half-mile away to where Williamsburg is, which Williamsburg, there's a couple of trees there, a little slough coming off of the river that the ships would stop at sometimes. And that's about the only thing that's there at the time. Okay, we're getting into photography. That's my favorite subject. Photography, I just always have liked. And when I was growing up, Papa had a dark room shed out there. And I'd go out in the dark room with him. That's what I'd see. That little red ball up there, that's the safety light. And when he would be developing pictures, the film, you couldn't use the safety light, but if you were printing the pictures, you had the safety light. But I still couldn't see the pictures hardly, even with that light. And I've still got the light too, by the way. This is one of the pictures that I made with that camera down at the test site. Just to make sure that, see if it was still working and everything. It still works after all those years. Repair. This picture, Molly is the girl on the right. Somebody, I don't know whether it was her mother or her aunt, was wanting a picture of her. And that was a beautiful picture of her, but the bride is in the way. You know, how do you tell the bride, hey, you're in the way? You know. But anyhow, she wondered if I could take the bride out of the picture. So I took the bride out of the picture. That's before, that's after. That was a job. About that time also, the tornado came through Gallatin and tore up a lot of things and created a lot of problems with houses that leaked, and then rain got in and ruined pictures and everything. And you have this picture, and the guy had to have a jacket on with pinstripes. Pinstripes are a job to work with, to fix. But that took care of those too. Jim, I don't know if how many people know Jim Automotive. I was down there one time and he was asking me if I could fix this picture. And that's his folks, his mother and his daddy and his brother and his brother's son. That's Jim in the front. And he said he had on a red shirt. I said, a red shirt? What's the other people have on? And he told me what his dad had on and what his mother had on. So
Good job.
I fixed that too. And I do a lot of history stuff, repair on pictures and this, that, and the other, and you come upon one like this and you just fix it, you know. Then there's this one, and the people from Portland here will enjoy this. You can't, well, you may be able to see what it says up there in the Roy Hill quarterback, 1961, 1661. And Roy had this, he's a classmate of ours. And he had this poster, and it had all this information on it. And the guy in the back there with the white shirt had a 25 on his shirt. And Roy said, Allen, says, can you fix this so that says 14 on that shirt instead of 25? And because 14 was his number and he was quarterback. And he said, and I'm throwing that ball to Jerry because Jerry was number 85, and the color is about the same, you know, close. And he said, can you make my shirt purple also? I said, well, I'll see what I can do. And he said, all this stuff is messed up on here. I just wonder if you could fix that too. You know, you've got the stripes on the legs and this, that, and the other, you know, while I'm doing it, you know. So it took a while, but it came out pretty good. You all know me, a lot of people do, and have known me for a long time, and you know that I see things from a different perspective sometimes than some people do. You can tell from these pictures that are around the room here that I see things different than a lot of people do. I'm going to have several pictures here now. I walked out one cold morning, frost on the railroad cross ties out there around lining some of my flowers. And these little ice crystals were there, and I went in and got my camera and made the pictures of the ice crystals. And you'll see those ice crystals on these pictures over here on the table also. And they're a little sharper than they are on the screen. Plus there's two different styles of ice crystals. I went out there another day, just a couple of days later, the crystals were different kinds. Instead of little octagon shape or whatever, you know, pentagon shape, they were flowers instead. It was just different. There's a leaf with crystals. People miss this. You know, beautiful stuff. That's not so beautiful. That's my neighbor looking through a 3-foot long, 1-inch diameter pipe. And I said, I wonder what that looks like with my camera. I took a picture through the pipe. Does anybody know what this is? And that's it? Just a bug? You know what it is? That is a Chinese hackberry aphid. You may not have seen one, although there they are. And if you have your car parked under a hackberry tree, you'll know what one of these little creatures does, you know. And that's their excretions that do that. Plus, the fact you go down a country road or something that's paved, and if there's a hackberry tree over here on the side, there's a big black area around where the droppings come down on the road. You wouldn't think something 1/16 of an inch long, you know, would do that, but it does. I walked out the front door one day, and there's this coleus right next to the front steps there, and I looked down and it was smiling at me. And I thought, that's neat. Let me get my camera. So I got my camera, made a picture of him, and I thought, what can I do with that? So I made a Christmas card. You know, you can do stuff with stuff like that. Yeah. I'm looking for James Bond right here. That's looking down the barrel. This was in 2012, and that is the sun, and the little black dot is Venus going across in front of the sun. And I didn't do that with the telescope. It's a weird setup. I was in my room, in my where I got my computer and all that stuff. Actually, I switched rooms now. It's a bedroom. But I opened the window, knew from the radio or television what time this was going to happen. It was going to happen in the afternoon. And so I opened up the window on the west side of the house. I happened to find a lens about inch and a half, inch and a quarter in diameter with a 5-foot focal length. That's from me to you, focal length. Rare. I mean, I just happen to have one. I don't know where I got it. But I mounted the lens in a piece of foam core board, set it up in the window, let the sun shine through, and I put a piece of photographic paper down there, not to expose, but just, it was white. It was printer paper, white printer paper, very fine grain, and I put that down, and it was shining on that, and I got it focused at the right distance, you know, and I waited until this came along, and then I got down there with my camera, and it was too bright, so I put a piece of red, a filter, red filter, over the lens. I went back down there and I photographed that and turned it into black and white, and that's what you get. You have Venus coming across the sun. The little arrow doesn't belong. I don't know how you get rid of that little arrow. Oh, there you go. Hey, that works. There's Venus. There's a sunspot. There's another sunspot down here. And there's a couple of flares right there. But all that on the sun, which is just really neat. The solar eclipse came through last year, and people talk about Bailey's beads, and that's Bailey's beads on the right over here, the little red areas. I had a filter for that I put over my lens on the camera, and it worked fine. Another fellow was there. There were people at the house from different places. I had people coming from North Carolina. They were there. But there was a gentleman who came, and he had a camera, but he didn't have a filter for it. And I had some extra filter material, so I made him a filter for it so he could use it on his camera. He made some beautiful pictures. They talked about the diamond. That's what they talked about when the diamond. And the diamond was bright. After being dark like that and everything, that pops out and it just blinds you almost. Hello there. That's a praying mantis. He was on my car, but I thought, you know, he needs a personality. And so I gave him a personality right there. It took me 6 months looking through pictures and this, that, and the other, and I'd looked at this picture a dozen times, you know, but I never noticed that other bee on the back of that bee, you know. And I wrote to the bee people. I found them on the internet, and I got a return from England, and they said that that was a minor bee, not a small bee, but a minor bee, M-I-N-E-R. And he was confused, thinking that was a female, and it wasn't. And that's a bumblebee. And everybody knows what a sweat bee is. Sweat bee is. And he's on a blade of grass, and I just thought that was a neat picture because it was tiny and the color makes it neat. And a honeybee drinking water from the water fountain. And this bumblebee, he was coming up over this flower. It's just a neat picture. And I saw this and made this picture. These little flowers are 1/4 of an inch, and they're growing out in the yard. Nobody ever sees them. And I wrote this little thing that says, each day the beauty of God speaks out, look at me. And in our hurry, we pass it by. 2005. And that's true. These flowers, you can see from the dam, those are about a 1/16 of an inch, between 1/16 and 1/8 of an inch. This one's another 1/4 of an inch. That's a creeping veronica. And they just cover the ground sometimes. It's beautiful little flowers, purple and white. Good Portland colors. And then there's a butterfly on a coneflower. And you see those little cones, that's where it gets its name, coneflower. There's little cones sticking up in the middle. And those things are just really tiny. And I thought, boy, it's just wild how tiny they are. But then there's a little weevil or whatever sucking on one. And I thought, I got to get a picture of him, you know. And he is really tiny. And there's hummingbirds. I've got several hummingbird pictures and everything. They are beautiful, beautiful little birds. And then there's mushrooms and, oh, there's a gnome, and it looks like Jack.
Alan, I can't believe you did that.
I did that.
I would have come.
Jackie, he's a good friend and everything. So I put his face on the gnome. You can't see it very well without enlarging it, but anyhow. I like to make pictures of flowers, and that turned out pretty well. It looks like an explosion of fireworks or something. You know what it is? Dill, exactly. That's dill from the bottom. Look it up towards the sky. That's a monarch on a zinnia. I always liked that picture. Then there's a water lily. This is a cover of a CD that I did for Elena. She's from Russia. She used to sing at go bands quite a bit in several different places around Portland, different places. And she lives, she and Greg, and they got a son now, Eli. And that's the back. And you may have seen that picture also in the Sumner County book. It's a big book, you know, and the picture is in the very center of the book. It's 2 pages. And then there's cemetery tour. From here, we are going to go A lot of the pictures made by him Stark. These weren't some of them, though. This one, does anybody remember or know where this is?
City Hall.
City Hall, exactly. I made that several years ago, individual pictures, and put them all together around the center part. That was without layers. And then these pictures in City Hall, I gave them 494 pictures of Gallatin. And they used 200 and some odd in this, these two windows right here. This is some of the books that I've been privileged to work on, do the pictures for. Even the barn book up there, CEMC book, I've got 4 pictures in there. And there's other books, including a book that my mother did. One that I did, middle row, second one from the left, Tennessee School for the Blind, Garrett Sturdivant letters. And it's a compilation of letters that were written back in the 1800s. And it was put on tape by a reader at the blind school so that they could, hear what the letters said. Then we get to the American Legion, we're in the movies, the 1940 movie. I worked on that for a couple of years, probably, maybe more than that. Doing a lot of research, doing a lot of time sequencing, research, finding out who people were, trying to identify people that were in the movie and everything, putting it, copying the film to VHS tape and then to DVD, and producing it and everything. And we showed it at the Palace Theater at least 2 times, anyhow. And there's Jackie again down here in the front. But it was a good showing. We had a real good time and everything. The Portland composites, these were, most of these, not all of them, but most of them were done by Mr. Stark. And he started making these pictures for us anyhow in 1916 at Central High School in Gallatin, and some of the other places maybe they were earlier than that. But our pictures, we didn't know for sure where they were for a while, and then finally found them, and they were in disrepair, missing frames, missing pictures. Some of the pictures themselves, the whole composite was missing, and we ended up using 8x10s and copying 8x10s and getting them enlarged, and we put them all together and did a lot of work on it. Oh, by the way, this one right here, 1975. My sister's in underneath the thing in the middle there. But this person there, ever watch Duck Dynasty? You watch Duck Dynasty. Mountain Man, that's Mountain Man. Tim, and he was from Portland, graduated in '75. You can see some of the work we went through. We had to replace pictures that weren't there, and so I had to copy them off of a 8x10 and then enlarge them to a certain size in order to put them back where they belong. In 1955, the Lambeth twins were in there, and Mr. Stark, they put the wrong name on the pictures, on the two girls. And one of them, I forget which one it was, said, "Can you change those names for us?" And so I changed the names on those two pictures. There's Miss Reba. The girl that's going to be speaking next time, she's a Strother, and Miss Reba Jernigan was a Strother. I think they're kin to each other.
She married a Strother. She was balanced.
Oh, okay. Here's the work that was being done, and we did that. That's the class of '63 that was doing a lot of the work. It was their project and everything, but they invited me to be the technical advisor and the photographer for copying all those, and I copied all of the pictures from 1916 through 1999, all the group pictures, big composites and everything, and the archives has copies, and the archives also has a set of negatives for the pictures that I've copied. So things like that need to be done.
Yep.
There's Mr. Stark. Mr. Stark was born in Centerville, Iowa, on Christmas Day, 1882, to farming parents. In about 1903, he began his career as an itinerant or pioneer photographer in Kansas and Nebraska, traveling about a 300-mile circuit with a mule-drawn wagon. In 1904, he had his first studio in Downs, Kansas. But having completed a course at the Southern School of Photography in McMinnville, he soon loaded his wagon and returned to Tennessee for 3 more months of training. He enjoyed the area so much more than Kansas, he soon opened a studio in Gallatin and began his long and successful career. He met Miss Prudy Groves in Franklin, Kentucky. And this little postcard was sent August the 31st, 1909 to her mother by Prudy. And it says, "Dear Mother, you can look for us to marry afternoon Wednesday." They got married. Nice looking couple. Her mother was Mrs. William Groves. I don't know, I think her, in Franklin, Kentucky. Let's see, they had one daughter named Evelyn, and he worked in Sumner County for 70 years. There's 2 things you'll see right here, and one thing you hadn't seen before probably. Stark Studio is in the old Penny's building. This was a Penny's building. It's a parking lot now. And it's behind what used to be First and People's Bank up on the square. But you see that building on the left? It's Randy's record shop when it was up there. That's the only picture I've ever seen of that. Mr. Stark studio up there. A lot of us remember sitting on the bench and getting our pictures made as seniors. And a lot of people got the pictures made that weren't seniors too. There's Mr. Stark making a picture with that camera. And here is Mr. Stark. Guess who that is beside of him? Ralph Emery. A young Ralph Emery. cleaning, copying, and preserving the negative. How many people, most everybody in here is of an age that know what negatives are. There are a few people, young people, that don't have a clue what a negative is. And the glass plate negatives, of course, they were made with a camera like this, and they fit inside of these. This is a negative holder, and it would slide in behind the camera. Photographer would take this piece out, which would leave this exposed, inside the camera, and they'd take a picture, and they would put this back in there, lock it, flip it over, take it out, flip it over to the other side, take another picture on this side. So you had two pictures, two shots. And film, that's celluloid type film, but this is a glass plate negative, and you can see, I don't know who the lady is, a lot of the pictures that we have done are not identical, well, 99% of them probably. 1,975, I think, is how many that I've photographed so far of John's collection. And we've named about 120. This is what we have left to do. Rots are up. You see all these negatives. There's roughly 7 to 10,000, 7 to 9,000, I think, there.
You need a little help.
And we've done 1,900. We're making progress. You can see what condition these were in John Garrett's shop, and he had a lot of sawdust in there from working on stuff, and then he would spray that stuff with lacquer. And so this is a combination of lacquer and sawdust. And it's better than it looks. So these are only in, if you take them out, the actual image can be halfway decent. And there's a lot of them. If you notice here, in those big boxes, there are small boxes. And the ones that are in the small boxes are in fairly decent shape. Some of them have degraded over the years just because of chemicals, But some of them are in excellent shape. This is an example of a negative that is dusty, but it's not bad, The ladies that clean them do a good job, and see, it cleans up pretty good. I cleaned that one the other day. But these are the ladies, some of the ladies that clean them. There may be a man who pops in there once in a while and helps too. And they clean the negative with distilled water, and they only clean the side that does not have the emulsion on it. The other side, they take a fine cosmetic like brush, and knock the dust off of it. And it's usually fairly decent. And then once they get that done, they'll fold it up in this little quadfold piece of paper, which is acid-free, and they'll put them in a box that will hold about 35 of those negatives. And then that comes to my position on this. You see the boxes back there on that table to do, and they're all done now. But I'll take a box and I'll bring it in here and set it on the chair. Then I'll take the negative out and I'll put it on this, another creation that I made to copy the negative. And I'll put it on there and photograph it. And when I photograph it, you see what condition they turn out. That's Dr. Rucker, and he's in his World War I uniform. He was in the Buffalo group. There's a lot of ladies with hats back in the 20s and teens. This is the first lady of color that we have seen in a wedding dress.
Beautiful dress.
This is a couple. Cute little girl. There's a lot of cute little kid pictures, you know. Reminds me of that picture of the insect, you know, saying, what are you talking about? But you know what he's saying? He's saying, that's awful. Y'all have any questions? Anybody have any questions?
What would you do to clean regular photograph, negatives?
Regular negatives.
Yeah, that are,
You can get, probably hard to find now, some chemical, comes in a little bottle. I have about that much left in one, that it's safe to clean negatives with. And it's not hard to do, but you just have to be careful not to scratch them.
would you do it with a Q-tip? What would you do it with? Or not, no?
The softest thing I could find that's not abrasive, of course, and it's a Q-tip. Sometimes even the cotton, you know,
It's too.
can scratch. It depends on how much force you put on it, really. But negatives are important. How many people have negatives? Have pictures?
Oh, yeah, boxes of them.
Boxes of negatives?
They're not in good shape.
I understand negatives. I've got boxes of them too. I mean, many boxes, because my grandfather's negatives and my mother's negatives, and it just, they come up everywhere. But negatives are very important, because that's as close as you can get to the actual person or thing, you know, whatever. It's closer than a picture. So, any other questions? Well,
What would you
y'all-
store old negatives in?
What was
What
that?
would you store old negatives in?
Oh, the historical negatives like
What would
these?
you, yeah, well, even some more older than that, that are, well, I don't know about older, but definitely are on plastic, like I've got some on that heavier plastic like you have.
Mhm.
What would you store them in? Archival paper?
You can get archival paper, envelopes,
Uh-huh,
archival envelopes that are cut for specific sizes. They're all acid-free. I can't remember if they're non-buffered or not.
There's probably a few photography stores still around, like on the internet maybe or something, right, that would sell that kind of thing?
Right. There's a couple of archival companies still left too. What's Gaylord? Gaylord is one archival company, and that's where the archives here in town gets their materials from. It's expensive, but you know, you can save the documents.
yeah.
What are your plans for all the pictures you're making from these glass negatives? What are your plans
Well,
to do with all those photos?
What happens to those after making the pictures of the negatives? I take these up, take my camera up and give the chip to Julie at the desk, and she puts them on the computer, makes positives out of them, and assigns a box number, which the box number is already in what they're in,
Yeah.
and a specific number for the particular negative. And then they're written on as far as what the subject is, you know, man, woman, child, whatever. And that way you can go back and you can search them on the computer. I asked if they were going to put them on the internet, and she said, well, Bonnie said too. She said, I don't know that we've got enough memory and computing power to put them on.
Be interesting if you could, there could be some family members that would
Exactly.
recognize people.
You're right.
And you could start identifying at least
But-
some of them.
They may be put on the computer in the archives, and
Who's this, Alan?
that's Kennesaw before,
Not like it is now.
not like it is now. But you might be able to go into the archives, you know, and research them there, look through them. Any other questions?
I have one. Which programs do you use to alter or restore any photos on your computers?
The first one that I used was Picture Publisher. It's an old program, and I still go back to that program sometimes because you can do things with it that you still can't do with other programs. Corel I have on there, and I'll use mostly right now, but like I say, sometimes I'll still go back to Picture Publisher, which is an older program. And they're good programs, and they're not $600,000 or whatever, you know, like Adobe.
How about Photoshop? You don't use Photoshop?
I don't
They
use
want us
Photoshop.
to leave.
Is there a
You
reason?
mean Adobe Photoshop?
Yeah,
Yeah.
why?
It's about 15 times more expensive than 94.
Okay. Legitimate.
That's it, you know. And it's another thing too. I can do things with Picture Publisher, the old program, in 2 steps. It takes 5 steps or more to do with Adobe. So
Understandable.
why bother?
Yep.
Well, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, it's been very
Well,
good.
I enjoyed it.
Thank y'all for coming.